TV party tonight! What? TV party tonight!
Oh, we got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews.
Don't want to talk about anything else!
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated
To our favorite shows.
Oh, my circuits!
Everybody loves Hypnotoad.
Scary dog!
Pearson and Blurnsball.
Futurama!
Good evening. You are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting Premier Podcast. Team Party Tonight. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm interrupted all the time.
And mortified.
Mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, our favorite show, if we can ever get to it, is The Witcher, brought to you by the good people at Netflix, Sean Daniel Company, Still King Films, Plated Image, One of Us, and Cinesite. Sure. The Witcher is a fantasy drama streaming television series created by Lauren Schmidt Hissrich, based on the book of the same name by Polish writer, something Polish.
I really want... No. I want you to try this, please.
Andrzej Sapkowski.
Close enough.
Set
That's the least offensive pronunciation of a Polish last name you've ever done on this show. So.
Set on a fictional medieval-inspired landmass known as the Continent, The Witcher explores the legend of Geralt of Rivia and Princess Ciri, who are linked to each other by destiny and the word fuck. It stars Henry Cavill, Freya, Allan, and Anya Chalotra. And I am joined by Robert Winfree of 401mania.com. How do you do, sir?
I do all right. You know, I got to do my MLW review earlier than expected, so that's done and out of the way and currently up. So if you're interested in that, early plug. We've got a movie coming up next week that I'm loosely excited for, so, you know, not the worst place to be.
And also joining us, he's the Misfit and the Miscreant. He's your Dungeon Master. He has his own Twitch feed where he rolls the dice and takes you on an adventure. Ladies and gentlemen, from the Screaming Boy podcast, Ronnie Adams.
Oh my goodness, that show will forever haunt me. In a good way. Yeah,
I might go back to it one day.
Maybe one day. There have been talks, maybe somewhere out there in the interweb. But
Ronnie, did you join us for the last conversation about The Witcher that we had 2 years ago?
I did. I think I don't remember much about it, so probably.
All right, so I don't remember if I've ever asked you if you read the books or played the video games or anything. But
you did. I've never read the books. I want to. I'm looking at them now, but I played all the video games. Okay.
So this season, from what I read, is based on the following. A Grain of Truth from The Last Wish, Blood of Elves, and the beginning of Time of Contempt. Robert, did you read any of those?
I've read, when it comes to The Witcher, I've read the first book, which is just a great introduction. It's more of an introduction to Geralt. It's a bunch of kind of loosely connected short stories. A lot of the individual Monster of the Week stuff from the first season drew heavily from that book. So I recognize. So the Grain of Truth one, which is their riff on Beauty and the Beast, is from that book. I've read part of the second one. I haven't. My family was kind enough to get me books 3 and 4 of the Stormlight Archive, and I'm halfway through book 4 at the moment. So I'm gonna pick The Witcher back up after I'm done with that.
So what did you guys think of season 2 here in terms of what you know of the source material? And that might be a hard question to answer if you don't know all of it, but I'll start with you, Robert. In terms of capturing the spirit of the source material, obviously you're not setting the room on fire or anything, so it wasn't lock and key. I'm guessing you thought it was fairly okay.
This does a really good job, I think, of capturing most of the tone of the books. It leans a little bit actually darker than the novels do, again, to my limited experience, which is not a bad thing necessarily. I want to be clear about that, but it does, in part because you're able to impart a more visual aesthetic to it than just the words on the page. It winds up being a little bit darker than my interpretation was, but I think it fits well, and I'm not complaining about it by any stretch of the imagination. in the landscape of contemporary media, where 85% or so of everything is made for children under the age of 8, it seems. Like, I watched this season of television and I got most of the way through it and I had the same reaction to this I've had to a few other movies and whatnot. Like, it's nice to watch something that's made for a mature audience. And I don't mean that there's actually a lot less sexual material in this season than in the first one. And I don't mean it that way. I mean, like, it's not made for children, and it's nice to have that option on occasion.
Well, I mean, even if you took out the swearing and took out the nudity, or, allusions to sex and whatnot, it's very dense.
Yeah.
Excuse me. It's very dense material. Like, I really this is one of those where, unlike Hawkeye, which I had on the background while I was working on the computer, this was something I had to pay very close attention to, or you will get lost. I mean, I guess because I've seen the Lord of the Rings movie so many times, I don't get nearly as lost anymore when I watch those. But it's like that level of you having to, memorize character names and and there's so much graphic world building that makes it so dense that if you're just kind of playing on your phone while you're watching, you're not going to understand any of what's happening here. Yeah. Ronnie, I see you nodding your head, and so I want to jump in the conversation with your thoughts.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's very dense material that you're dealing with here, and I found myself this season rewatching the first 3 episodes because I was trying to do that and other things at the same time, and I ended up getting lost. I mean, that's all there was to it. I mean, like, I was like, wait, what? And I remember I went back and tried to watch the first season again in preparation for the second season. And I watched the first episode of season 2 and it jumped back in and it put me in season 1, episode 8. And I was like, wait, what? And it was like, so it was, you have to pay close attention to it.
Yeah.
And, but other than, once you sit down, once I sat down and started actually watching it, that's when I found myself enjoying it and being able to follow along.
Yeah, this season was a little bit easier for me to follow than the first season. The first season jumps around and it doesn't tell you where it's jumping to and from. This one was a pretty straightforward story. You basically had 2 different stories going on. You had the stuff going on with Yennefer and Fringilla, and then you had Geralt and Ciri in the Keep of the Witchers, and then their fates ended up being intertwined. Over the course of this season, we find out that Yennefer has lost her magic, and she is driven to reclaim said magic. Geralt is pretty much just content to keep Ciri out of danger, but knowing that the world is dangerous and there are things that he has to prepare her for, he begins to train her, and she decides she wants to be a witcher. Over the course of time, she discovers that she has magic of her own and that she is the key to a bigger situation going on, which we find out at the end of the season. And that's pretty much all of season 2. So let's talk about it. We'll start with the obvious thing that we should address here, which is the storyline from soup to nuts involving Geralt training Ciri and their time spent in the Witcher Keep. So I'll go to you first, Ronnie. What did you think of what do you want to talk about in terms of Geralt's time in the Keep with Ciri?
Oh, you're killing me.
Yeah, you're killing me too. Geralt.
RG.
Geralt.
Got it. Gary. Got it. Okay, it's fine.
Gary the snail. Okay, so for the longest time, all you hear is we're not going by the games, we're not going by the games, we're not going by the games. And all I have to go by are the games sadly right now. Soon I'll pick them up, when there's other reading material that I've got to get through first. But this reminded me so much of the game.
In what way?
He trains her there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really? That was actually something I had in the back of my mind. I'm like, do they spend this much time training Ciri in the video game? I guess they do, huh?
It's allusion to it. I mean, you don't have to train her, but the walking on the poles and the sword, the sword play and everything, and trying to learn how to use her magic, and even the allusion to the stuffed unicorn. There's a unicorn scene in the game that is, we'll just leave it at that. But there's a lot going on there that I was like, well, they might, I've never read the books. Maybe all this is in the books too, but that's all I could think about. It's like, oh man, this is like the game. This is like the game. This is cool. But other than that, like, yeah, where else is she going to train? I mean, like that father-daughter relationship comes hard and quick in this. I feel like maybe I don't remember much from the last season, but that he took to her pretty quick, and then he's like, yeah, I'll train you. Just call me a dear old dad.
I was a little worried. I thought that the training sequences and the amount of time spent in the keep was going to drag the show down. It's propped up by the amount of tension between her and the other Witchers, especially the long-haired, red-haired guy. And because I don't know what any of the source material is, and this thing can get very graphic and adult very quickly, I'm like, oh, like I'm counting down to when the red-haired guy attacks her.
Right.
Something along those lines.
That was my next. I was going with, because there weren't that many. What I've dealt with, there's not that many Witchers. So there's only Geralt and an older guy in the game. So that was really cool to see that this is actually a keep for the Witchers to come and stay. So there was a lot of tension there. I was with you on that. I was like, oh, this is going to get weird. This is going to get weird. Thankfully, it didn't get weird. She ends up earning the respect, and it was pretty cool. I mean, like, it didn't drag anything down. There wasn't like any montages or weirdness. It was nicely paced.
She doesn't become the world's greatest swordsman overnight, which was
right.
I can't tell you how terrified I was that they were going to turn Ciri into Rey.
Yeah.
Hey! Don't bring him up. Don't bring it up.
Look, I that's a very solid touchstone for everyone about this kind of thing. And they didn't. Ciri gets up to do some training, and first of all, Geralt babies her just a little bit because he's still figuring out how he wants to do this. And so the others kind of goad her into, trying to become the American Ninja Warrior, but with swords and maces instead of foam.
Very true.
And
I tell you what, man.
And she gets knocked on her ass.
I was gonna say
more than once. Like, good.
I again, just as a point of comparison, like I watched all 6 episodes of Hawkeye today, and stuff that happens to him and Haley Stanfield. I'm like, I don't really care. Once you've seen Black Widow jump from orbit and land on her feet and not nary a scratch. Which, just FYI, I think it was the Screen Junkies honest trailer that did a countdown of every time Black Widow should have died in her own movie.
Might have been that. Could have been so many.
So, like, I'm numb to it all, and I don't have like a visceral reaction the way that you're supposed to when you see your hero being belted across the screen. But I did with her in that when she's trying to run across the obstacle course, and those maces hit her. And she gets dumped on her ass. I was like, Jesus Christ, how is she not dead? Like, kids made us start of stuff.
Well, I mean, in fairness, and in other circumstances, I think you'd be entirely correct there. This is very clearly a training device. I mean, that's what it exists to do. So it's very brutal, but it's not designed to be lethal. And
okay, neither is the NFL, but shit happens.
True. It's less than lethal.
Why did you bring up Jonathan Gresham like that? Bad reference on my part.
Didn't think I did, but okay.
Yeah, I deserve that one. I absolutely deserve that.
Anywho, I felt really bad for her, and it was well deserved. I think it's a credit to the writing, and it's a credit to the special effects that they were in the stunt team, that they were able to give you something where, with all of the amount of like violence you see on TV, they can still produce something that gives you a visceral reaction. At least
also, it's a credit to her as well as an actor.
Yeah.
In wrestling terms, a good sell.
Good. Go ahead, Robert.
I think the other thing that's important to that is you mentioned, you don't care about anything that happens in Hawkeye. Well, some of that's to do with
makes me sad.
Well, hang on. It's not to say Hawkeye's a bad television show. It just means
We'll talk about it at length, and I have a lot of glowing things to say about Hawkeye next Thursday for Ronnie, Allan, and I.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, once you've seen these people, they just.
I mean, I didn't say
example,
anything. I was just,
Well, no, I said something about very, very specific, and I don't need this. Nobody understands me, like a Life of Agony song, and so I say I don't care what happens to these people because they get blown from one end of the continent to the other, and they're like dusting off a scratch, and that's all that happens to them. It's like it's hard to get invested in the violence. That doesn't say the rest of the show is awesome. Go ahead, Robert.
Hang on, and to that point, I think the fact that shows like The Witcher, and I mean, it obviously cribs very hard in some respects from Game of Thrones. Other shows like this go out of their way to give you appropriate stakes.
Mm-hmm.
No one in this show has plot armor. And that helps. Now, we have more plot armor here than we do in other shows. Again, Game of Thrones literally kills its main character at the end of the first season.
Oh, Lord.
Most of the way through the first book.
I was like, Game of Thrones and Oz have a lot in common.
In that respect, yes. Like so we have more plot armor here than you do in those, but you have a lot less than pretty much every other major television property. You can watch Hawkeye and you don't care when Hawkeye is there's a gun to Hawkeye's head because no, they're not going to kill him.
Right.
I mean, oh, they killed Kingpin at the end. Well, yeah, if you buy that, I've got beachfront property in Omaha for you.
So The Witcher.
And the point there is this show goes out of its way to establish its stakes and to follow through on threats. Like, there are consequences to the actions the characters take, and some of them are pretty nasty.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're able to do that in a narrative setting, that endears you to the characters so much more than the Paragon power fantasy, who is never in danger, who does everything right the first time.
But also credit to the costuming department for making Geralt.
Oh wow, that was worse than the first one.
He's gonna find different pronunciations every time until the end of the show.
The credit to the costume department for giving him armor that looks Ronnie, what did you think that was, like leather armor?
Yeah,
that looks like it would be enough to protect him from from most combat oriented wounds. He's not being weighed down. He's not wearing chainmail. He's not, so he's not tremendously well done. He still has a lot of agility. But
chainmail? You mean plate mail, not chainmail?
Yes, sorry, plate mail. I didn't mean.
I'm wearing chainmail.
Okay. My point is that, like, he's not running around in a tunic, and and because he's possessed of Superman powers, and doesn't get a scratch on him. Like, he gets messed up a couple of times, but I'm buying it because at least he's wearing armor oriented to that time and place, to where he should, it's not stormtrooper armor. It should protect him from most attacks. So again, credit to the costuming department for making me buy into, like, oh yeah, even with his degree of his Witcher superpowers, I can see him getting out of most scrapes pretty okay.
Yeah.
To the overall arc, I think you're right. This could have been an interminable interlude in this. I mean, it's a relatively short season. It's only 8 episodes.
Yeah, it's really,
But even then, they spend 4 or 5 of those with her basically in that position.
Mm-hmm.
That could have been a terrible drag on the season.
Yeah, I got a little worried when they first got there and they spent so much of the time just like drinking and telling stories. And I'm like, this is fine and all, but can we move this along? And I kept wondering, what were they going to do with her as she sat there in her fancy wedding dress?
Well, I like her, Ciri's quest for identity. She's trying to fit in. She's trying to figure out who she is.
Right.
And so that comes across, and I think that it comes across fairly well. She changes her costuming depending on what she's trying to do at any given point in time. She starts out in the flowery dress and then goes to the more she goes to like the leather tunic and the pants because she's going to be doing stuff and doesn't need to get caught up. And then when one of the other mages shows up, she goes back to being a bit more female and flowery in what she's wearing. So they do a lot of nice things like that to get across her searching for where she feels she belongs without beating you over the head with dialogue.
So another thing that happens while they're there is one of the Witchers is runs afoul of what's called a Leshy, and he ends up turning into one. And they spent a couple of episodes dealing with that. Ronnie, what did you think of all that?
I thought that. I mean, like, I'm all about the Monster of the Week shows and stuff, but I thought that was a really good. I mean, like, it proves that the Witchers, like, although like you said, they have some degree of superpower or whatever, they are mortal. They are fallible, and they can die. And I thought that was fantastic. I'm a big fan of the different kinds of monsters anyway and stuff like that. I literally play a GM a game called Monster of the Week, where it's based off the Monster of the Week shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and X-Files and all that. So to actually get some depth to that I thought it was pretty cool.
What did you think, Robert, of how they dealt kind of internally with the Leshy and some of the other stuff that was happening at the Keep in terms of monsters and whatnot?
I thought it was well handled. I especially like that. This is one of the things that the first season, the way it was structured, much like the first novel, are important for what's about to happen. Because you need to understand that Geralt has not only seen some shit, he's incredibly capable.
Yeah.
So,
let me jump in with one thing there. I'm generally like not a cowardly guy. Even if I get an ass beating, I will deal with what's coming, and I'm not going to cower in the face of danger. However, if Henry Cavill's ever coming at me with the eyes he had with the sword, when he was about to chop off Yennefer's head, I'm running for cover. Like, Jesus Christ, right. Henry Cavill.
Man,
gave quite the performance. He's overall a very good actor. He certainly has a manly presence about him. One of the few in Hollywood I could say that about. But I think we can all agree. But like, he got off the horse and went right for Yennefer with those eyes. And I was like, oh God, like that's scarier than any horror movie I've seen recently.
Run, Yennefer!
I would not have been shocked if he'd done it. You kind of know he's not going to. But there is, and this is again to the credit of everything about the show, both the character writing, the performances, and the situation, there is that question you have in the back of your mind, like, is he really, like, he could, and I could believe it.
Yeah, I thought it was,
I do have a question about Geralt, Robert. So Henry Cavill plays him as sort of a grumbly, mumbly type of speaker. It's a lot. We talked about this in season 1. Every time he never talks, and when he does, he just mumbles fuck, which always cracked me up. Here, he's a bit more. There's a lot of conversation between him and Ciri, so he can't just grunt. But he plays them as sort of grumbly, and I thought that was maybe an effect of being a Witcher, except that nobody else in the castle talks that way. Everybody else is like straight off the Cockney boat.
He does a little bit in some cases. Well, if you pay attention, he talks like the man who made him, the oldest Witcher at the Keep, the one who's responsible for, whose name escapes me at the moment. But he talks like him.
Okay.
Look, if you want to know why Henry Cavill speaks the way he does in this, it's because he does a damn near perfect imitation of the voice actor from the games.
Yes.
Okay.
Like,
that's crazy.
That's what he's doing with this. He played the games because he's a giant nerd. God bless him.
Yeah, he almost lost.
But that's the question: why do they make even in the games so much different? I mean, I just didn't know if you had any insight as to why he speaks differently than everyone else.
Because it's cool.
Okay.
Because
Christian Bale's Batman has affected the culture in ways none of us have realized.
I don't quite put it at the same level as Bale's Batman, because Bale's Batman voice was
wearing hockey pants.
Hang on. Yeah, I don't think Bale ever really got a handle on how to talk like that the way Cavill has a handle on Geralt. Like, he's able to give you depth of emotion and tone and inflection in his voice while talking in this very that's not like, you have to work at that voice.
I don't want to go off on a tangent, but Bale's Batman growl was wildly handled by Christopher Nolan. Well, just in general, because the whole thing about growling is you going, I'm vengeance in the shadows, is not Well, you see, Catwoman, we gotta talk about the guy. You don't understand. Why are you doing a monologue in that voice? Just talk normal, you yuck.
That's what this feels like. My guy.
This spot represents 50% of the people, and this spot over here represents 50% of the people. Like,
now that you've turned into Danny DeVito. So anyway, I started blasting. I think you're correct in the sense that the Batman voice was handled incorrectly there. I mean, and I don't know how much of this I want to lay at Nolan or at Bale or at some combination of or Goyer or whoever. But look, the best handling of the Batman and Bruce Wayne vocal dichotomy is still from Batman the Animated Series.
Okay, so rounding back to The Witcher.
So rounding back, you asked about the voice.
Yeah.
He does it because that's the way he sounds in the game. Yeah. And he sounds that way in the game because that's the way they wanted him to sound, I suppose. I genuinely
I'm okay with that.
You're correct in that he doesn't quite sound the way everyone else sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is also because everyone who's a Witcher comes from a different place.
Yeah.
Okay.
And some of them come at different times in their life. Some of them have different accents developed by the time from when they were earlier in childhood. Geralt very clearly comes from the man who made him and the man who mentored him in the Order. And he's basically done, like, that's been his whole life, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where his speech patterns and and some of what he does comes from. Other people, they come from slightly different locations. So it's a big, the Witcher place is not it's not a nationality. It's not anything like that. They're a melting pot. The Witchers go out and take orphans and try to make them Witchers. And so you come from wherever.
Anything else about that part of the show, Robert, before we move on to Yennefer's story?
Sorry. I was just thinking about which I'm from Jersey. What do you want?
I think the last thing I wanted to mention, you brought up the Leshy and how it attacked them, and one of the earlier points I wanted to make. The entire intro being, Geralt has seen a lot of stuff and he can handle himself. So when things go sideways, like, okay, I know how Leshies are dying out because they can't reproduce. Well, this one infected one of the fellow Witchers, and well, that doesn't happen. Well, okay, we got a real problem then when things don't work the way they're supposed to work and have been observed to work for the last however many hundreds or thousands of years. Like, that's a real problem. So when they go out and they try to, like, I loved that bit of mystery that was added here because they pay it off they don't pay it off entirely, but they pay it off in the way you should. You take the next step. Like, okay, these aren't working the way they're supposed to work. And then the giant nightmare fuel that comes out and just tears the tree in half and they have to fight. Leading Geralt to kind of go, okay, this thing, none of us have ever seen this thing. So what the hell? And trying to figure out, like, that bit of mystery is one of the nice driving points of the plot. And again, it's not completely resolved by the end of the season, but you have resolved the first step and you're ready to take the next one for the next season, which is a good bit of pacing as far as that goes.
All right. Let's move on to Yennefer. But before we do, pay some bills. We got the skills to pay the bills, don't we, Robert?
Well, in that, I know we're not going to talk a lot about Yeskier this time around because he's a much smaller character than he was in the first season.
Sad.
But we don't quite get a song that's as awesome there's
nothing as good as throw a coin at
There's
your
nothing quite as catchy as throw a coin to your Witcher. I will say,
Toss you.
Dude, I also said throw a coin at your Witcher.
I was talking about you.
There are some really awesome covers of the Prison Blues song that he sings at one point.
We must talk about that later. But in the meantime, I don't think the writing needs any kind of correction here. If you, however, are looking to, I knew where you were going, and that's not the order I want to do this in.
That's fair.
They could have used Grammarly. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M Network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M Network to download Grammarly for free. All right, so there was an attack at the end of last season. Yennefer did some sort of chaos magic, and there was fire involved.
Yeah, and she channeled fire, which you're
Okay.
not supposed to do because it consumes your connection and your ability to channel chaos.
So she ends up being captured by some sort of opposing army for the first part of this season.
She's captured by the last remnants of the army that attacked them. The why the name escaping me?
She's with Fringilla, and what we find out over the course of the first couple episodes is she no longer has her magic.
Yeah.
And her story over the from beginning to end is a quest to reclaim her magic. She ends up running afoul of what ends up kind of being the big bad of this season, as near as I can tell. Something along the lines of the demon mother, what the hell is this called? The faceless mother, who basically tells her, bring the child to the door and you'll have your powers back. And when she realized, and when she ends up escaping some sort of peril with Ciri, and over the course of their getting to know one another, she realized what Ciri is, and she's like, oh, well, this was a terrible decision. And that, of course, is what causes Henry Cavill to nearly cut her head off. But talk about Yennefer and Fringilla, who separate at some point. Their stories start conjoined, and then they separate in the back half of the show. What did you think of those parts of the show, Ronnie?
Ask your question again, because
just talk about Yennefer and Fringilla.
Oh, I mean, I like the character, but I was less interested in her than I was the whole Ciri and Geralt thing. I don't know why. Every time she came on screen, other than when she was about to be eviscerated by a look, God, that was just terrifying. But it was just one of those things where I don't know. I found her a very selfish character.
Okay.
But then again, I found her almost sympathetic because of where she came from, how she was treated, and everything else. It was just, I don't know. I feel like I've seen this storyline before so many times that and I hate to say this, it's not boring, but it can get boring to me.
Yeah, the depowered character trope is.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of those things. Well, it's not even the depowered character trope. It's the revenge trope that turned into the depowered character trope. That I'm just like, can you just
It seems like her entire story this season was it was in the service of getting to the next thing. This felt very much like an Empire Strikes Back, middle chapter for her in particular.
Absolutely.
I'm somewhat with Geralt and Ciri too, but less so. Definitely with Yennefer. I'm not going to pronounce it right. I just refuse at this point.
I know, and that's why I'm laughing.
So, I feel like, with her it was a lot of, there's a place we're going to get to. This is the bridge to get there. And sorry if it's not that interesting to all of you, but it's necessary in terms of story.
Absolutely necessary in terms of story.
Well,
I will never take away from anybody that loves that. I just absolutely love that storyline. That's great. That's great. I just feel like that I've seen it that many times, and that I'm like, okay, let's go.
You know what?
I wanted to be a part of the Super Friends.
Well, here's the thing. It kind of reminded me of Dune, in that when you lay in that much heavy world building, and Game of Thrones kind of had a very similar issue where there's so much specificity in terms of who the races are and what they're fighting over and why they're fighting and who's allied with who, that if you don't, either you don't have great recall, or you're paying super attention, or you don't write it down, it all becomes, you're just kind of watching images flash on the screen. It's hard to buy into any of it, because I have no idea why the elves and the humans are fighting, other than maybe the elves and humans, and I don't know who's on whose side, because it all gets a little convoluted after a while. But I don't know. What did you think, Robert?
Well, briefly about Yennefer. Yeah, it's a very common thing to have this arc for a character. I think it's held up in this case by the performance, which is still solid. 2, I think the fact that she's able to kind of attach to other things that are happening while she's depowered for a chunk of when she's depowered
Mhm.
lends her some credence. Like, she's not doing nothing.
Right.
She's still active. She's still engaged in the world. She still has goals
Sure.
and hopes, dreams, and
She's
whatnot.
being
And
attacked left and right.
Yeah.
You have the
that
one
too.
scene that was bordering on like sexual assault with the one guy from the Brotherhood.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing. If you're going to depower a character, you can't have them wallow for the entire time, and you can't
Right.
have them be snippy. They have to continue living, and she does. She's still doing stuff. She's trying to save a bunch of the elves from the being rounded up into concentration camps, basically, while she's got no power. She's still active, and that's one of the things you have to keep in mind if you're going to write one of these things for one of your characters.
She does have a great hero movement. It's one of the few things in the show that I could, recall off the top of my head and say, like, what does she do? Well, she has this. They tell her, prove your loyalty, kill this guy, execute him, and she's like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And she helps him. And she helps him escape on horseback. Okay, she should have because Robert just wants to watch the world burn in his grease paint, or she should have because it would have serviced the plot in some way. Psycho.
A little
Both.
from column A, a little from column B.
I don't have to choose there. It is both. Like you have the
Well,
opportunity.
okay, explain the. I don't care about your own psychosis. Explain the plot one.
You have one of the commanding generals of this invading army at your mercy, and your decision to save him is predicated on you not trusting the order that you're sworn to. Look, I'm not saying it was a dumb decision. It wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying, well, let me put it this way. In that moment, that could go either way, legitimately.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still tell pretty much the rest of that story either way.
In terms of like a pure hero moment, though, if she kills the guy, are we as the audience supposed to buy her as any kind of a hero? And I think that's more my point. While you guys may be steeped in the lore and very much fans of high fantasy, remember that Netflix is always also going for as many general audience people as they can.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
If they see somebody who's a main character do something non-heroic, I think you'll lose part of the audience.
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
Look, you might, and I'm certainly. I did not want to put my head through a wall at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those things.
Jeez.
Let me put it like this. I almost feel like her not killing him. I don't want to say it was out of character because it wasn't, but that felt a little bit. That's the closest I think. That, and there's one other moment. That's the closest we get to feeling the hand of the author here, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that she can't justify what she did, but you could equally justify a couple of other things. So the author had to make a choice, and they made a choice to service something that happens further down the line. So it's in a really, really minor squabble as far as that goes. So the other thing you mentioned was the alliance about the elves and them being persecuted horribly by certain human kingdoms and fleeing to the other kingdom that's invading everyone. The first season, the invading armies are very much painted as stormtroopers. This is the evil empire. These are the forces of Mordor. Here we thankfully, and I don't need Game of Thrones complexity where no one's the good guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't hate real complexity, where the kingdoms that we've been attached to so far and have seen good and bad become xenophobic and potentially genocidal. So maybe the invading army being a little bit more hospitable and open to the elves showing up. They're not all bad and they're not all good. No one is. And I appreciate them being able. They handled that about as deftly as you're going to handle it in this kind of a format. And I think that's to their credit. I was terrified. This show gave me 3 heart attacks because I saw what they were doing. And I went, you're this close to the edge, right? And if you step over it, there's almost no going back. Like you're treading a very fine line here. Again, one of them was Ciri. starting her Witcher training. Like, okay, if you turn her into a Mary Sue, who is just great at this right off the bat, I'm out. Like, there's no reason for that. And thankfully they didn't. Here we go to this again, the invading kingdom, and our like field commander, not the emperor, but the field commander is captured. So for a while, this city is ruled by the Rainbow Coalition. And somewhere in my head, like, oh boy, if everything's great and everything's peachy, as long as the women are in charge and as soon as the men show up, everything goes to hell. I'm like, that's close. Like, you can see what. Fortunately, and I do mean fortunately, they never get that way. Like, Fringilla is deferential to, forget the commander's name, for most of whenever he's around. She is deferential to him, and she's still processing, her trauma and whatnot. And so I get that. And thankfully, by the near the end of it, she makes a power play, and I loved when that blew up in her face, not because I dislike her, but because I don't need that. Like, if your evil emperor has to be competent, and if he's falling for that, he's fallen for anything. So I was terrified that this is what we're gonna do. Like, everything's gonna be peace and harmony and rainbows and puppy dogs, and your messaging is gonna get wonky about this. And thankfully, like, the two, in this case, it's the pregnant elf and Fringilla as kind of the two people most in charge of this city. They're good at governance. They're not perfect. They screw things up. Some things don't work out all that well. But it's not. They never make it an issue of, well, if only it was X in charge, then everything would be, puppies and rainbows. It's more that she knows what she's doing. These two people are competent in this regard. And when the other guy shows back up, he's a military commander, not a city planner. So things start going wonky because his mindset is wrong. Not wrong. It's different than what they're trying to accomplish. And that's a degree of nuance that you just don't get in most shows these days. So I appreciated that. If I've got a gripe about this, this is true of this show. This is true of the Wheel of Time series. This is true of a lot of shows these days. And my brother pointed this out to me, and I can't unsee it. In any shot where there are more than 3 people, they go out of their way to make sure every possible ethnicity is represented.
Okay.
And
let me ask you a question. So people are clear. Your problem is not with representation.
No.
Your problem is it's never presented as organic or in any kind of service to the story. It only, it's more virtue signaling and messaging than anything else.
It's you ever see The Kid, Disney movie with Bruce Willis?
No.
There's a scene in that near the beginning where he's trying to get an executive out of trouble. Like, he's a fixer in like a PR sense. And he says, okay, we're going to fix this. So here's what I need. I need you, Big Mouth. First of all, shut up. Twitter wasn't a thing when this was made, but stop tweeting. We're going to record you, and you're going to get pied in the face by a bunch of kids because something he said that was like insulting to children. So he looks at somebody else and says, I need a dozen kids. I need 5 white, 3 black, 2 Asian. And like, he goes down a list of I need this number of this ethnicity, and they're all going to take turns pieing you in the face. Well, you say I deserve this. Everyone will have a laugh, and we'll move on. But that's what it feels like. And if I might briefly mention about like Wheel of Time, and this is true here. When you get to a big city, sure, big cities have widely, even medieval ones like this, especially this kind of fantasy. A big city can have a wildly diverse population. Cool, knock yourselves out. I don't care that the elves are a diverse people. They should be if they've been around long enough and had different clans that grew up in different parts of the continent with different needs as far as how human beings evolve and whatnot. Sure, that's not a big deal at all. When your rustic backwater town in the middle of in the ass end of nowhere just so happens to have 8 white people, 2 black, 2 Hispanic, 1 Chinese, like that's when the problems start to pile up. Now, in fairness to Witcher, it's not as bad as Wheel of Time, where it is painfully obvious. But it is a thing that becomes a bit of a problem in The Witcher only because xenophobia and ethno-nationalism are pretty big themes in the material, and they start to come out in this season. The hatred of the elves and the way they're persecuted, and the elves' hatred of humanity, and the another thing about the show, thankfully a good thing, neither side is right. Okay, rounding up and trying to exterminate the elves is a unambiguous evil.
I was going to say.
Hang on, that's an unambiguous evil. There is no debate. The elves seeking to wipe out humanity and reclaim everything that was theirs at the expense of every man, woman, and child is an unambiguous evil. This show, thankfully, is not at all afraid to paint historical victims as villains, given what they choose to do. Like, these are people who are able to make choices, and that's what defines them, not what happened to them 800 years ago. And this is another thing that so many other media properties these days get asked backwards. They expect you to empathize with whoever has had the most historical wrongs foisted upon them, and not care that, our lead elf, the Elf Queen, one of her last scenes is literally murdering children.
Right. This is after some mysterious person has murdered her own baby.
Yeah.
That I guess she thought she couldn't have, or something along those lines. But this was all like a big machination to, this was the assassination of Ferdinand to get the war started, from what I could tell.
Something along those lines, yes. And I just wanted to briefly say I appreciate that. There are good humans, there are bad humans, there are good elves, there are bad elves. There's that level of complexity is very much missing in a lot of media, and it's very much a breath of fresh air here. So I want to give them kudos for that.
Hey, let me get Ronnie back in here. Ronnie, we're just about running out of time here. I didn't know if there was anything on your mind that you wanted to talk about with the show, or if you're like, it's good.
It's good. I mean, he's bringing up a lot of really, really good topics along the lines of like the elves and it's one of those things where, like, okay, she's helping free the elves. That's really awesome, but they're dicks too. So where do we go from here? It's one of those shows where, like, he's like, I can't really add anything to what Robert's been saying.
Let me ask you a question. I don't know if you know what this is. At the the sort of stinger at the end of the show is the wild hunt or whatever. Yeah. What is the significance of the hunt? What is in store for us in season 3, if that's in fact what they deal with? It was one of those things where somebody who has no idea about the IP, Henry Cavill does those lines with the man never like emits any kind of fear in 2 seasons of this show. When he talked about the wild hunt, there was a palpable anxiety about the whole thing. So the wild hunt, go.
The wild hunt, from what I understand, is almost an apocalyptic event. It's not like otherworldly or spectral creatures. It's an actual being, from what I understand, from the book. I'm trying not to go through the games, because if I quote the games and tell you what happens in the game, I'm going to be absolutely wrong. I have a feeling, but in the games, it's these creatures that are coming from another world, from another realm, that want Ciri for her power, for her elder blood.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where we're going from there.
All right, Robert, if you want to add anything about the Wild Hunt, go ahead. But the last point about this, and then we're going to close up for the night. It is revealed that there is another character who makes his return, who turns out is Ciri's father. So if you want to touch on the Wild Hunt, go ahead in 50 words or less, and then talk about Ciri's dad, and then we're going to call it a night.
The Wild Hunt is Ronnie's mostly accurate here. It's not just a reference to an event. It's not a ephemeral thing. It's a real group of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of their version of the Four Horsemen.
Okay.
So them releasing the Faceless Mother at the end to go to this other plane of existence and rejoin the Wild Hunt is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because they're gaining power, and eventually one of the things they want Ciri is for her ability to break down the barriers between worlds, which is actually what the entire continent world of The Witcher is a fun one to get into, because it was made by what's called, I think they call it the Conjunction of the Spheres, which is actually a bunch of different planets and realities that were forced together and overlapped. That's why if you go into different parts of the game world, you get stuff from like contemporary America.
Okay.
Like you get some wonky stuff there because these different worlds were forced together, and the continent as it stands is simply the end result of that. So these things live on another planet, essentially, and are looking to come through and wreak all kinds of havoc because that's what they want to do. So yeah, and seeing Geralt be a bit afraid, again, like this works because he's stared down everything that you could possibly imagine and has given, just doesn't care at all. Like he's not and suddenly this though, and oh boy. I mean,
Cavill's performance in that was brilliant as well, because, like you said, you think he's going to cut off this woman's head that he's fallen madly in love with, and and then just to see a man with such rage and such passion. Well, I was going to say poised rage. Because he never really loses his mind, but you can tell that there's anger and rage built up there. All of a sudden he's afraid. He's afraid of this thing. The thing is going to happen to these people. And I was like, man, that's really cool. And I forgot about Ciri's. I almost forgot about Ciri's power to go between worlds. So that's part of her elder blood, And like I said, I'm quoting the games again. I don't want to do that. I really need to read the books.
Ciri's responsible for, I think, my only real moment of this show when I kind of rolled my eyes. That's when Yennefer's taking her to is kind of taking her towards the door, and they get to the river they can't cross. So the first time when she's like, "Okay, you've got power, you can raise the bridge."
Yeah,
and it's a struggle for her, and starts bleeding from her eyes. Like, okay, and she can't quite do it. Like, okay. Then, because they need to be on the other side of the river, she screams in frustration. Them and their horses are transported over there, and I just about, my eyes rolled out the back of my head. Like, oh, come on. You're better than this.
It's the whole Luke and the X-Wing,
okay, last thing.
Ciri's dad.
You brought up Ciri. Yeah, you could see it coming as he speaks in the end. Like when he's giving his orders and he starts talking about the importance of getting Ciri. As soon as he starts in on that, like his insistence on it, like, oh,
yeah, you knew.
You knew. It's still a really good stinger because her mother is dead, and we know that they died in a boat, some kind of a crash, and we don't know what happened to him. So it was a good stinger. I liked it. Even if it's a touch predictable when you get into that scene, it's only predictable in that scene. Every other bit where the Emperor is saying, "Bring me this girl," like, she's powerful. Okay, how does he know? Well, I'm interested to know how he knows, but there's any number of ways he could know that. How did the Emperor know any of the stuff he knew? There's a bunch of ways. You're willing to go along with that. But as he kept talking about just how important she was, like, oh, like the way he's doing it, and some of the word choice, like it becomes clear it's more than just she's a tool. This is something that matters to him. So I bought the stinger. Can't wait for the next season.
Mhm.
As far as this season overall, there are some things I liked about it relative more than the first season. Others, it's kind of a two step forward, one
I
step
thought
back.
this was better paced.
Yes.
There are parts of season 1 that really dragged for me, and I thought,
Yeah,
I
can see
thought
that.
they structure each episode enough so that at least by the end of it, somebody had mentioned, and I can't remember where I heard this from, that like Netflix does something so that does something at the very end so that you'll keep watching. They want you to binge the whole thing.
They do. So they always try to end on mini cliffhangers.
Yeah.
Right. And so I thought The Witcher, but that was good though, because and so in terms of tension, there would always be rising tension, some sort of big explosion and a moment. And then, you want to keep watching to see what happens next. And I thought this season did a better job of that than the previous season.
I'll give you that. I think this season, the action took a big step back.
Yeah.
Both in terms of quantity and quality.
He doesn't have a really good sword fight in this one. He did in the first season. This is more hack and slash with monsters.
There's one decent fist fight.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not really a big action set piece to kind of hang your hat on for this. The closest they get is the one right near the end when all the like pseudo dragons are being summoned.
I will say this though, if you're, the one action scene was when he saved Ciri from the town guards that calls attention to. Yeah, that was brutal and awesome.
Yeah,
and it's in terms of action, it's better than any monster slaying scene because the stuff with the monsters was, I mean, not that any of it's bad or anything, but you can, it's obviously him playing with like a lot of CGI and special effects and whatnot.
Yeah, again, like those vary wildly, but from scene to scene.
Here's the thing, like seeing him brutally take out a squad of guards feels more gritty and realistic to me than when he's trying to trying to kill a giant praying mantis.
Yeah,
and that's because I'm not sitting here thinking, well, the praying mantis doesn't, but what about the praying mantis's children? Like it's just
But my babies.
It's sad as he knocks the teeth out of that one. But like that fight they have in the library, like that's one of the only good ones.
I was just thinking like,
and
that's not that I don't want to see him fight monsters. The show is that's at least part of this show. But one, they're not going to kill Henry Cavill. Two, he's going to kill the monster, and not that I don't think he's going to be successful with the guards, but something else may happen that at least I'm interested. Or just watching one man brutalize a squad of other men,
he may get knocked out, or
is more interesting to me than him fighting the giant praying mantis, who I don't identify with at all. So for a moment it looks cool, and then it's like, okay, they thankfully also don't draw those out. These aren't 20-minute fight scenes.
Yeah, that helps it. But the action took a step back as far as that goes, all things considered, from the first season, which had multiple sequences across the entire first season that were really good. We don't quite get that same level here, which I'll give them a little bit of slack because they might have been dealing with COVID restrictions as far as like they might have had other stuff they wanted to do but couldn't. Like there's no way you were going to shoot a big army sequence, the kind that you got in the first season here, because cramming that many people that close together is just going to cause you all kinds of problems depending on where you're shooting in the world.
Go ahead and finish what you're saying, but I want to see when principal photography started on season 2.
So if we kind of look at the seasons of television of this show thus far, season 1 was a lot of introduction for all the relevant characters. This is a lot of setup. There's a lot of mystery introduction, and then you can kind of set. So now we know, we were told names in the first season of kingdoms and whatnot. Now we have motivations.
Okay. I'm going to jump in here.
Okay.
Filming for the second season began in London in early 2020, and we were just dealing with starting to deal with.
So
COVID.
they got locked down pretty
but was halted for 2 weeks in March due to concerns over COVID. Actor Christopher something Confirmation said that he tested positive for COVID. May of 2020, film and television productions that were filming in the UK were given permission to resume. Yeah, so like they had to take 2 months off for this. The show resumed pre-production in July and officially resumed filming in August. Yeah, so this, to say, and then they got halted again in November. So they finally wrapped filming for the second season on April 2nd of 2021. Gee, you think this got delayed a bit?
Just a bit. So, like I said, I'm willing to give them a little bit of an asterisk here about certain things that they might have had better other ideas and other things they wanted to do that they couldn't for real world concerns. And like I said, I'm willing to give them the acknowledgement that that's why, but I'm also going to acknowledge that that's what happened. Like that is that the end product suffers. I think the last thing I wanted to say, the acting here is all great. One except there's only one bit in this show that makes me roll my eyes because I can't for the life of me figure out why. The jackass mage Stregobor, who has been wrong every time he's spoken, and for some reason our Council of Learned Mages still does he have tenure or something? What's going on here? like there's no reason those people should take anything he says seriously based on all the available evidence that they have. Like, I'm not saying how dare you not know about what took place in a dark alley between two other characters. Like, actual evidence that this guy's an idiot, and yet everything he says still carries tremendous, no, sorry. There's no reason for him to still be in the position that he's in, and that's the only thing that I think really kind of gets my goat. Like I said, the acting is all great. Henry Cavill is he's the man.
All right, you mentioned before that that there was some pretty fun covers of the song the Bard sings while he's in jail.
Well, he's got two songs this time around. One is the Burn Butcher Burn song, which I
love.
It's a nice little song. Like, that's our reintroduction to Dandelion here.
Wanting to hear any of those, you should check out Amazon Music Unlimited. As a matter of fact, we're giving away a free trial of the Amazon Music Unlimited service.
You don't say.
I do say. At getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network. Again, it's getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network. If you want to see all 97,000 versions of Toss a Coin at Your Witch's Head, that'll be there for you.
There are at least that many versions of that song.
Yeah, if you want to hear any of the new stuff covered by these same people, go ahead and use our free giveaway of the Amazon Music Unlimited service. All right.
Did you say throw a quarter to your wisher?
Yes.
Okay.
Toss a coin in your wishing well.
You sound like my dad. Throw a coin to the good.
That's okay. I think I mentioned on a different show. My father keeps
take this quarter, take my quarter, shine my shoes. Come on, boy.
My father, who keeps mispronouncing things. I can't remember what it was now. All right, so that's our review of The Witcher season 2. This week,
absolutely worth your time if you're loosely inclined. A solid continuation from the first season. Can't wait for the next one. I was watching the show and realized how much I missed it as it was going on.
Well, tomorrow we have an Everyone Loves a Bad Guy re-air. It was a show that Robert did on Freddy Krueger because Scream comes out tomorrow, and we've already re-aired our Scream retrospectives. Part 1 was Scream 1 and Scream 2. Part 2 was Scream 3 and Scream 4. Go back and listen to those if you have a second, especially that second one where we discussed Scream 4. That was actually a really good conversation. So Robert was with Sean and I for that, and we had a good time was had by all, as near as I can tell. That's not one where if I had to go back and edit it, I have to edit a lot out. We mostly stayed on topic.
Yeah, we stayed on topic. We had some good discussion. Scream 4 is an interesting. Yeah, we did as I think back on it. That movie engendered more discussion than I thought it would when I was just watching it again for the show.
Sure. Saturday, we're going to re-air Robert's discussion with Benjamin J. Colon. They did a Wes Craven tribute when he passed away a few years ago, so we're going to re-air that. And then on one of my many hiatuses back then. See, now I'm going 4, 5, 6 days a week. Back then, I used to take an entire month off. I don't know what happened here, but during one of my many hiatuses, either to have children or to go on cruises,
or both.
Or both. Robert Winfree and Sean Comer did a retrospective of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Part 1 airs Sunday. And they didn't do this the way Sean and I used to do. Sean and I used to go chronologically. Whenever Sean and Robert got together, like, okay, first episode, good stuff. Second episode, horrible stuff. So
well,
the first
on the plus side, when it comes to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, that does offer a very clear delineation point that is almost chronological.
So they did the original Nightmare on Elm Street, then Dream Warriors, then Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and then everything else is in the second episode, and that airs Monday. And then Robert, we will be, us Witcher folk, will be rejoining again on Tuesday night. It'll be myself, Ronnie Adams, and Robert Winfree talking Scream 5. We will have a second roundtable because this is yet another one where 97 people wanted to be on, and I said no one gets in to see the wizard, nobody not know how.
Apparently this has annoyed people, so I'm just going to throw it out there. I have to reference this outlet in particular because you like to try and troll me about them.
I thought you were going to say I've annoyed people about the roundtable, and I'm like, they can all eat shit and die.
No. But apparently the movie review of Scream 5 from the vaunted halls of Variety actually spoils the ending.
Yeah, I haven't read any reviews yet, but I know Jeremy Thomas of 401 Mania put out a tweet saying, hey, if you like the movie not ruined for you, avoid these outlets.
Look, man, it's just, there's a reason I say Variety is not worth the digital paper it's printed on. It's not worth the space it occupies.
The Superblog team-up's coming up this week. We are honoring the great George Perez, who has got some bad medical news recently. So we're going to look at his Marvel comics that he did for an adaptation of Logan's Run, and we're going to compare that to the movie, and that's our contribution to the Superblog team-up celebrating the life and times of George Perez. We'll have re-airs of our Ozark Season 1 and Season 2 reviews, and then Thursday night it'll be myself, Ronnie Adams of the Screaming Boy podcast, and Al Sedano of the Resurrections, a Warlock and Thanos podcast, and we will be talking Hawkeye.
Yeah, that was... Can I tell you my favorite gag from Hawkeye? I haven't even seen the show, but I've seen enough clips to know this gag. Hawkeye has a Thanos was right mug.
I didn't even notice that.
I didn't even notice that either.
That's
he does. And it's great.
And then Friday, we will have a re-airing of our Battle Beast No More Hollywood Endings review. And then in the evening time, Jason Teasley, Jesse Starcher, and I will be reviewing Dummy Season 1, which was originally a Quibi series. It's now on the Roku channel. This is my favorite thing ever, and I haven't even seen it yet. This is Anna Kendrick palling around with a sex doll. I cannot wait. This is my next... Tonight's date night movie was Secretary. Next week's date night movie, Dummy. My wife is really regretting that I'm picking all the date night movies that of late.
Oh, come on. Hold on just a second.
What?
There's no way your wife regrets Secretary.
We watched it tonight.
I know. I'm just saying. Like, your wife will absolutely regret Dummy. 100%. There's no way
she
wife
hated Secretary.
Really?
My wife is
that
is not.
That surprises me.
Well, she's not. She likes her smutty books, but the first scene of Maggie Gyllenhaal walking with her hands bound with the bar behind her neck, she's like, I can already tell I'm going to hate this. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what kind of smut then you're into, because like the 1 minute you're telling me you like the bondage smut, the next minute you see the bondage smut on the screen, and you're like, this isn't for me.
It doesn't look how I envisioned it.
Yeah, this doesn't look nearly as fun as I thought it would be. I think the other her problem with Secretary is definitely one of those like indie type films. Like it's filmed like, it looks like it's filmed on like traditional film, like the way Spun was. Yeah. And Donnie Darko and some of these other, like classic late 90s, early 2000s up its own ass genre of indie film that we all love, that we all grew up with. My wife hates all that. Like I jokingly said the other night, like I like The Money Pit. My wife really likes The Money Pit. Like she is that person.
Okay.
Do not disparage The Money Pit.
No, it's a Family Guy joke. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we say like I like The Money Pit, like I think I was kidding her about it.
The inference there being I don't like The Godfather, I like The Money Pit.
So I'm coming out of the bathroom and and she's just like, look, I love hanging out with you, and I love that we have these couch date nights, but these movies you pick are terrible. And I'm like, all right, stepfathers. and she like shooed me out of the room. Go do your podcast, you artsy fartsy.
You should have thrown. I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry at her or something like that. You like grown-ups too? Is that where we're going with this?
She loves grown-ups too.
What's wrong with grown-ups too?
I don't know. Why don't you date my wife, Ronnie? What can I tell you?
Listen, I like the artsy fartsy, but I also just like turning my brain off and watching Adam Sandler, every once in a while.
She did not appreciate the event that was cinema in the name of Secretary. So we'll see how she does with Dummy. But then after Dummy, I got 3 weeks ahead of me of the 50 Shades movies.
Don't. Well, hang on.
That was the agreement we made.
Let me rephrase. If you insist on watching that shit, I have at least 3 YouTube videos that you need to see.
All right, well, send them to me. We're not talking about it right now. That's all.
Let me put it here. I mean, this guy's channel is more popular than ours anyway. But watch the Lost in Adaptation by Dominic Noble on that trio of adaptations. He roasts the hell out of them, and he concludes after reviewing the last movie by literally burning the first book.
I went on a date with a coworker to go see the third one, and she had to kind of like fill me in on what this, and I was like, I really like this girl, so I kept a lot of comments to myself, but there's 90 minutes of my life I want back.
You're gonna want a lot more than just 90 minutes if you're watching all 3.
All right, Ronnie of the Screaming Boy podcast, go ahead and do your plugs.
Hey, I've got a Twitch channel called Misfits and Miscreants. We do actual play through D&D on there. So we set up some cameras, we play D&D, and you get to watch it and interact with us. It's a lot of fun. We're playing Rime of the Frost, Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden right now. It's every other week. Starting tomorrow night, I am streaming some Magic the Gathering live play, which is we're going to be playing EDH, which in other terms is called Commander. So we're going to have some Commander decks out, tell you what our decks do, and then just see who wins. It's never me. I will tell you that. Never me. But we're going to have some other stuff coming up. Some more games, card games, board games, but we're going to also do some more tabletop role-playing games. I just picked up several different games from several different systems. I picked up the Alien role-playing game, which is a D6 system. It looks amazing. Picked up the Fallout role-playing game, which is 2D20. And then Dune role-playing game as well. So we've got a lot of stuff coming up that I want to, get out there and just, I've got a lot of great players that need the spotlight on them. We have a blast doing it. It's not to get famous. It's not to piggyback off Critical Role or anything like that. We just have a fun time doing it, and we have people that like to watch it. So, they live vicariously through us, I guess. But it's a lot of fun. So please come out and watch it. I'm actually streaming this right now. So if you're watching it on my channel on Misfits and Miscreants, why don't you go over to W2M Network and give them a follow here on Twitch, and then
there's a little heart button.
Yeah, a little heart button. Give them a follow, then you can follow them on YouTube and everying else as well. So do that for me.
Yeah, real quick, we have our TikTok up and running now.
Yeah.
I got on Sean's case about that today. And, some people have been asking, and I'm finally getting around to doing it. We are posting little 3-minute clips of each show that we do with video on TikTok now. And, and I think they're reposting to Instagram. So if you just want to, see a little taste of the show, a little nibble, you want to, little nibble of Robert.
Mark continues to try to monetize in snippet form now my mental health breakdowns as he goes through what critics say.
Those have been some great clips I'm choosing, huh?
Top notch.
The TikTok is up and running. The TikTok is up and running right now for W2M. So I'm not going to be posting them on my own TikTok anymore. They'll be on the W2M TikTok. I want to encourage everyone to like and subscribe to our YouTube page. And if you're not into watching the video, then you can find us on any podcast catcher you choose out there. We're on all of them.
You can find Misfits and Miscreants on everything except for podcast form right now, which I'm going to resolve that sometime in the near future
by doing the Screaming Boy podcast.
We may take over the Screaming Boy podcast. We never know.
One will subsume the other. They can be only one.
Absolutely. It's like,
Wow, I got another Henry Cavill reference in there. Good for me.
Boom.
All right.
Good for you.
Robert, go
I'm
ahead
done.
go ahead and do your plugs real quick, and let's get out of here.
All right. Mark and I reviewed
The
a movie on
355.
Tuesday. Yeah, the
Yep.
355.
My snippet of that is the best part of that entire interview. Us trying to imagine what the marketing meeting was like for that movie.
Oof. That movie is so bad. It's so. I've never seen a film director who makes Michael Bay look halfway competent before, but hey, Simon Kinberg, good
Well
on
done.
ya.
All
So
right.
Mark and I reviewed that. You can find my writing over at 411mania.com. I cover professional wrestling 3 nights a week. AEW's Dark Elevation on Monday. MLW stuff on Thursday. I mentioned at the top of the show that's already the most recent episode is already up. And WWE SmackDown on Fridays. So tomorrow, whatever they're doing over there, I imagine continuing to try and eat their own tails because that's what WWE does these days. I also cover not professional wrestling, mixed martial arts, the one I actually enjoy. This week, the UFC returns to action, their first show of 2022. UFC on ESPN. Make sure I get the number right. 32, also known as UFC Vegas 46. This will be the commentary debut of Laura Sanko. She's done commentary work for other promotions attached to the UFC, as well as Dana White's Contender Series on occasion. This is her first time doing it for a UFC show proper, so good for her. She's very talented. I will be covering it, so if you're interested in that, my live play-by-play will be in the MMA zone of 411 Mania. I also host the 411 Mania Ground and Pound radio show podcast. It's not a radio show anymore. This week was our first show of 2022. We looked back at the year of 2021, the UFC's most financially successful year ever. Well, the fighters kept getting screwed. My year-end awards, such as they were, and any news that broke, including Jake Paul trolling Dana White, and a bevy of fight announcements. Mostly title fights, including but not limited to Max Holloway falling out of his fight, the creation of Peter Yan and Aljamain Sterling getting shuffled around, and all of the various miscellaneous MMA news. So if you're interested in any of that, you can just punch 411 Ground and Pound into your podcast platform of choice, and you'll be able to find my stuff over there. Lastly, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. This is the last week I'm going to say this, but I want to thank every one of you out there listening. 2021 was our best year ever, which is an odd thing to say about a year that really sucked out loud, and in most ways. But we had our best year, and that's a large part because of all of you. So thank you all very, very much. We're trying to continue that momentum. So please like, comment, subscribe, share, everything you can do to help us out. We'll continue to put forth as much quality content as we possibly can. You guys just keep doing everything that you're doing to help us out. We would like to get on Rotten Tomatoes, so we need star ratings, and reviews on Apple Podcasts, and subscription numbers on YouTube. Those 2 things will help us get there. Then Mark can finally die a fulfilled human being.
I might hang around just a little while longer.
I'm not saying you're going to drop dead right away. I'm saying that's what, like, if you die without being on Rotten Tomatoes,
It'll be a life unfulfilled.
That will be your big regret. Like, that will be your rosebud. Your rosebud kind of moment.
Rotten Tomatoes.
Right. Ronnie Adams from RonnieAdams.com.
All right, folks. Thanks for joining us here on our conversation about The Witcher. Next week, Hawkeye, Al Sedano, Ronnie Adams of the Screaming Boy podcast. Until then, be well, be safe, and behave.